Well, thank you for being here. And I often start speaking by playing the banjo and by thanking everyone for being here. And the reason I do that is because after 17 years of not speaking, that's right, I didn't speak for 17 years. I took a vow of silence for 17 years. After 17 years of not speaking, those were the first words that I said. Thank you for being here. And I was thanking an audience much like this, of my family and friends who had gathered in Washington, D.C. on the 20th anniversary of Earth Day. That's when I decided it was time for me to speak. And the reason I started speaking on that day, and I always like to say this right up front because there's a clock ticking somewhere. The reason is that I had a message, and the message, after walking across the United States, not speaking for 17 years, was that I discovered people were part of the environment. And someone said, you know, John, yeah, people are part of the environment. We know that. Well, then I said, if people are part of the environment, then how we treat each other is really our first opportunity to treat the environment in a positive way. Wow. Or what I'm actually saying is that how we treat each other when we meet each other is really the only way that we can manifest our feelings for the environment in the physical environment through ourselves, through our interactions. And so that's what I was saying. Thank you for being here. So people had come to hear me speak. My dad was sitting in the audience, and my mom was sitting in the audience, and they hadn't heard me speak for a long time. My mom, she jumped up and she said, "Hallelujah, Johnny's talking." You know, you hadn't spoken to your mother in 17 years. My dad, he just said, "That's one." And I'll say it now. He said that because he followed me across the country. He wanted me to ride in cars and talk. He wanted me to be a normal person. And so he said that's one because I started talking. He wanted me to start riding in cars. I looked around because I hadn't heard my voice in such a long time. And I didn't recognize myself, and I didn't know where my voice was coming from. And so I was looking back to see who was saying what I was thinking. And then I realized it was me, and so I started to chuckle. And my dad, he looked at me and he goes, yeah, he really is crazy. Look at him up there talking. Well, I want to take you on this journey of how I got to be here today, even. Because this is all part of the same journey, and I want you to realize that you're all part of this journey. We're all part of each other's journey. And you are on a specific part of a journey that brought you here today. And just understand that we've all come together on this day, this moment, this place and time. My journey began in 1971 when I saw an oil spill. 2 tankers collided in San Francisco Bay, and I had never seen such an environmental insult. So I went with my girlfriend, Jean, to go see that spill. Can you see it, honey? No, I don't see it. Now, Jean didn't really sound like that. She didn't talk that way. That's what we call a theatrical device. I use that. Just so you know that was Jean. I don't have to do it again. But Jean said, no, she couldn't see the spill, but we could all smell it. And that's when I realized that there was something that was so big that you couldn't get away from it. We would drive this way, we would drive that way, and we could not get away from the smell. And that was maybe like how some people who live near refineries, they just live their lives. Well, we decided that we should drive back to our little town in Inverness, up in the Point Reyes Peninsula. And on the way back, I said, you know, Jean, we should maybe get out of our cars and walk, because cars are really what's the problem, us driving them. And Jean said, well, Jean said, listen, we can't do that because we don't have any money. And that's a sign I used when I didn't talk a lot. We didn't have any money. And if we started walking and we don't have any money, people are just going to look at us and say, hey, look at those hippies. They don't even have any money. They don't have enough money. They can't even hitchhike. But if we had money, and she had some plan that she was going to get lots of money, she said, if we had money, then people will say, hey, look at the rich people. They're walking. Hey, come on, let's follow them. They must know something. This was way before Forrest Gump, see? So we got back to our little home in Point Reyes in Inverness, and we started living life just like we had been. There was a knock on the door, and someone told us that our neighbor, Jerry Tanner, had passed away. Jerry Tanner was a deputy sheriff, and his boat had flipped over in Tamales Bay, a long, narrow bay. And he was lost. His family was saved, his wife, his children. So we picked some peas from the garden, and we went up to see his mother. There's only 350 people living in our little village. So everybody knows everybody, and everyone feels for each other. And we said that we're so sorry to hear for your loss. We're going to go have a walk into San Anselmo. It's 20 miles away. And we're going to dance and celebrate Jerry's life. How many people have walked 20 miles? You know, in Boulder. That's right. I got up this morning and had a short walk myself. But yeah, we left at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were going to go hear a group play, the Youngbloods. People know the Youngbloods? All the old people? Okay. Okay. Come on, people. Smile on your brother, everybody. Get together. Hey, remember that. Okay, and so we were going to go see them. They lived in our community, and we walked, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, we get there. And that last show, they were going back. They said, John, Jean, come on, we'll take you back home. And we decided, no, we're going to walk. It was on that walk that I realized that, gosh, I was 26 years old, and Jerry was 26 years old. He had a beautiful house, white picket fence around it. He had a great job. He was living the American dream. But just like that, he was gone. And I started thinking as we were walking, I said to Jean, I said, you know, all we have is right now, just this moment. That's all we have. Because there's no promise tomorrow's going to come. There's no promise the money's going to come. There's only the promise is this moment. That's it. And we're walking, so let's just keep walking. That's what I'm going to do. And Jean, she said, bye. No, she didn't say that. I just did that for effect. But Jean said that she couldn't do that. She was going to do things to make the money that we were going to have so people would say, hey, they're the rich people. Come on, let's follow them. And so I started walking. And I started arguing with people about what it was I was doing. That one person couldn't make a difference, they said. One person can't make a difference. And I started arguing, and I wasn't sure that I knew that that wasn't true. I called my mother and father, and I said, Mom, yeah, Johnny, listen, we didn't have those push-button phones back then. You know, I'm really happy, but I just wanted to call and let you know I don't ride in motorized vehicles. Airplanes, trains, nothing. It's for the environment. The environment, Mom. It hasn't reached Philadelphia yet. Clean air, water, stuff like that. Well, my dad wants to know why I didn't do this when I was 16. I didn't know about the environment then. Okay, all right, but I am happy. Yeah. She said if I was happy, I wouldn't have to say so. Mothers are like that. So I ended up walking around in Inverness and arguing with people. All the time I argued. And I got tired of it. So on my birthday, I was turning 27. I'd been listening to the Beatles, right? Number 9, number 9, number 9, that's 27. Got to do something on that year. So I decided when I wake up, I'm not going to speak for one day, just one day. That one day of not speaking, I learned so much that it scared me. The first thing that I learned was that I had not been listening. Once I got to be a certain age, I won't say what that age was, I thought I knew everything. And so I would listen to someone speak just enough to think I knew what they were going to say. And then I would stop listening to them and say why I thought they were wrong, why I could say it better, that they were wrong and I was right. And so that day of listening taught me something that maybe I needed another day. And it went to another day and until finally people in the town were really concerned. First, this guy, he doesn't ride in cars, and now he's not talking. What's going on? Into the world, said some. Beginning of the Aquarian age, said others. Oh, he's just crazy, said a few more. Well, I decided that I was going to not speak for a year because I was learning so much. Things that I had never heard before because I listened. And so because of this year of not speaking, I thought I better write my parents because they were expecting phone calls from me. Airmail. We didn't have email back then. From my mother, your dad will be on the next plane. Out in Philadelphia, where my parents were, they were very concerned. My dad came out, thought I had been kidnapped, I guess, by a strange California religious cult. They had been reading Life magazine, I guess. And so they came out, my dad came out, and he found me walking on the road. Jean picked him up at the airport, and, you know, we sees me walking on the road, and I have a banjo now because I'm trying to learn how to play. And I see my dad, and you know how it is when you touch someone that you haven't touched in a long time and that you really care about? And that's like hugging, you know. So I grabbed my dad's hand, and I looked at him and smiled. He said, "Hi, son, how are you?" And I just said, "What?" Gene said, "He says he's happy to see you." My dad's frown came upon his face, and he said, shook his head and said, "Come on, get in, we're going to go to the hotel." "He'll follow us." That's what Gene told him. And that's what I did. And so once we got to the hotel, my dad and I started to communicate. It was, my dad said, "None of this stuff. Write it down. Write it down." So we had to write little notes. I had to write little notes to my dad. And finally he calls up my mom. He says, "Yeah, he's okay." "No, he doesn't do drugs. He doesn't smoke. Or he doesn't drink." "No, this wouldn't work back in Philadelphia. I think we should just leave him here." And exactly that's what he did. He left me there in California to walk around, try to learn how to play the banjo and not speak, but I was listening and to listen. And at some point I started walking north. Every spring I'd walk up to Oregon and in search of little green places on the map. And those little green places were like national parks or wilderness areas, and I would find a wilderness area. The Kamiopsis Wilderness was my favorite, and I'd go up there and I'd spend the spring, the summer, and then I'd come back down in the fall, and I did this for a couple of times until it was time for me to go to school, to go back to college. And I went back to college without speaking. They had a special program for me, they said, for returning students, where you could live and all the things that you've done outside of the classroom, you could actually get credit for. And so I got credit for things like physical education, walking. I got 1 credit for that. I painted and wrote every day. I got credit for that, you know. I played the banjo fairly well. I could support myself with the hat, so I didn't have to do that all the time. And then there was a course that was like, a 15-credit course was nonverbal communication. Wow, I scored big time. And so I graduated in 2 years, and my dad came out, and he was so happy to see me. He says, "You know, look, we're really happy that you're here, that you're graduated. Don't think we're not proud of you, but what are you going to do with a bachelor's degree if you don't ride in cars and talk?" And so I hunched my shoulders, I picked up my backpack, I grabbed my banjo, and I walked east. And I got to Missoula, Montana, who I had written to, 2 years earlier, and saying that I wanted to come to school there. And they said, "When are you going to get there?" I said, in 2 years, I wrote. They said, "We'll be waiting." I did my work there. I wrote on oil spills and pilgrimage, and I actually taught a class without speaking. And it was really neat. I had a friend who could do sign language, my sign language, and I walked into the class and I said, "My name is John Francis, and I don't speak, and this is the last time my friend's going to be here interpreting for me." And I could see all the students in my class looking at their schedules and seeing if they could get out of this class. 2 weeks later, everybody was trying to get into our class. I would do things like, you know, what's he saying? What's he saying? I think he's talking about clear cutting. Oh, he's talking about you can't clear cut with a handsaw. He's using a handsaw. And so, you can clear cut with a handsaw. And this is a discussion class, right? And so I would just get back and let the discussion go on, which it did, and keep the fists from flying. A year and a half later, I have a master's degree. I'm graduating from school. My dad shows up. He says, look, we're really proud of you, but what are you going to do with a master's degree in environmental studies? You don't ride in cars and you don't talk. I hunch my shoulders, I get my backpack, and I continue walking. This time I walk all the way to Madison, Wisconsin, and become a fellow at the University of Wisconsin. I write on oil spills. Oh, this is great. I'm writing on oil spills, and my colleagues are saying, what are you writing on oil spills for, John? No one's interested. What kind of job are you going to get? Then something happens. Right after I do my final exams, boom, Exxon Valdez happens, and then there's one guy in the United States studying oil spills at a PhD level. This is Admiral Henn at the Coast Guard. Yes, we'd like to speak to John Francis. Yeah, we hear he's studying oil spills. Pardon me? He doesn't speak? Oh, well, we want to get him out here to Washington to talk to some of the people on the Oil Pollution Act of 1990 staff. What? He doesn't ride in cars. Is there somebody normal at your university I can talk to? And so they talked to my major professor who answered all the questions. My dad showed up again. He looked around, he says, huh. He saw the keys I had. That's a big thing for my dad, keys. He said, listen, my sister said I should just leave you alone because you seem to be doing so much better when you're not saying anything. But what are you going to do with a PhD if you don't ride in cars and talk? I hunch my shoulders, I grab my backpack, a banjo, and I walk all the way to the East Coast. And on the 20th anniversary of Earth Day, it took me 7 years and 1 day to reach the one Pacific to the Atlantic. But on the 20th anniversary of Earth Day, I began to speak because I have this message that the environment is all of us, and that it's how we treat each other that really matters. It matters so much because environment is about human rights and civil rights and economic equity and gender equality and all the ways that we relate to each other. And that's what I have to say. After 17 years of walking across the United States and 17 years of listening to a lot of different people, that's what I had to say. That's my message, and that's why I'm starting to talk. My mother, hallelujah, my dad said that's one, and I started laughing. Well, this moment, when I said thank you for being here, when I used to say that, I was thanking the people in the audience for being there to hear me, because it always takes that one, that two. It takes someone to have a message, and it takes someone to listen to the message. Well, for a long time I've been saying that, and now when I say thank you for being here, I'm thanking people from all over the planet. From all over the planet for being who they are, for being here on this journey, because this is our journey. It's just us here. It's just us. And when we went out in space, I'm actually a National Geographic explorer now. I sailed to the Caribbean, walked the length of South America, through the Amazon, and spent a month in Antarctica, walking around in Antarctica, and I wrote this book. And so, published by National Geographic, they've made me an explorer. So I'm just coming from this place, and this is part of what I want to say. I'm just coming from this place in Washington, the headquarters, where all the explorers get together, and talk and share their stories. Well, the one story that I had was, how did I get there? Because I was walking all this time, and I didn't fly in cars. Well, once I was walking through Venezuela, and this is about how I got here as well, and how we're here together. And I walked through a prison, El Dorado, and as I got to this prison, I got challenged by the guard. And the guard said to me, "Pasaporte, pasaporte," pointed an M16 at me, and something was going on in my head, something was going on in my mind, because I said, "Passport? I don't need to show you my passport. I'm Dr. Francis. I'm a UN ambassador, and I'm walking around the world. I'm thinking this is a disguise, and I'm trying to get out of prison. And he just looked at me. And I said, and if you don't believe me, go back and ask Jesus, the comandante, who I had camped with the night before. Well, he looked at me and he didn't shoot me. And I just kind of walked on, and as I got out of gunshot range, I started dancing in the road, into the jungle. I'm going, free at last, thank God Almighty, free at last. Now, somebody else said that too. And I wondered why I did that. Why was I thinking I was in prison? And it turned out that I realized that I was in prison because, unlike not speaking, that every year I asked myself, was it still appropriate to not speak? Walking, I never questioned. And it had become a calcification. It had become a prison for me. I couldn't change, and I didn't want to let that go. I knew I had to. I knew I had to unlock that prison cell and let me out of it because it had become that. It might have been appropriate to walk when I first started out. I mean, if someone said, John, just walk east, and yeah, and get a banjo, and shut up too. You're going to make a difference. That would have been fine. But every year I asked myself about not speaking. I never asked myself about walking. So I decided that when I got to Brazil, I was going to fly back home, scare my parents, and do work like I am doing now. And then I would go back to where I had stopped, and I would continue walking. And so I did that for the rest of my journey. And that's what I do now, and so that I get here. So that's how I got here. I guess the important thing about that is, for me, and I think for all of us, is that we need to revisit our decisions sometimes. We need to sometimes sit down and say, okay, where are we? We need to redefine ourselves. We need to redefine exactly the environmental movement. What does that mean? Where are we? If it's a movement, we've gone somewhere, and we've probably changed. We've probably learned some things. And now, what do we think? And now, how are we going to proceed? So it was that moment of letting myself out of prison and becoming the person you see here today that allows me to be here with you all today. And I think that we have this moment right now, where we're all part of each other's journey, that we can get to make a difference. We are making a difference just by being here. We are making a difference just by listening to each other. And if we continue to listen to each other, I mean all of us listen to each other, imagine what the world would be like if we could learn from each other. Imagine what the world would be like. There are going to be lots of wonderful speakers here today and throughout our lives. And if we can just listen without that, I know what you're going to say and I don't believe it. If we can just listen with an open heart and an open mind, we can change the world because we can change ourselves. Thank you for being here.